Hey everyone! Before we dive into today's story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of our car history deep dives. And if you'd like to support the channel financially, all the necessary details are in the video description. Now, buckle up. Today we're taking a ride through the real story of one of the most iconic muscle cars ever. Practically any muscle car born during the golden era can be called iconic to some extent. If this iconic status could somehow be measured, the classic Challenger would undoubtedly rank among the very top. The bitter truth, however, is that recognition and true fame only came to the Challenger in the 21st century. Back in its production years, the model's fate was far less glorious. From this story, you will learn the real history of the Challenger, without flowery exaggerations or overblown myths. No matter how successful the design of a car might seem, for a new model to become truly successful, it must be ahead of its time and remain attractive not only at launch, but for at least several years after. In this regard, the Challenger taught Dodge and Chrysler a very harsh lesson. Entering the pony car market in the 1970 model year, the Challenger arrived late to the party. By then, the Mustang, Camaro, and Firebird had already been dominating since 1968, when pony cars accounted for 13% of the entire U.S. market. Even AMC had released its Javelin, yet Chrysler, for some reason, kept dragging its feet. That was its biggest mistake. The Challenger story should naturally begin with the Mustang. It was the Mustang that made Dodge dealers and Chrysler executives demand a model of their own in this class, especially since Plymouth already had the Barracuda, which had debuted even earlier than Ford's Pony. But Chrysler's then-president Lynn Townsend, for reasons unknown, insisted that Dodge's new, sporty model should have nothing in common with the Barracuda. As a result, in 1966, Dodge released the midsize Charger, which failed to win much customer love in its early years. That same year, the second-generation Barracuda debuted, and Chrysler stylists were already working on its third generation, scheduled for the 1970 model year. Realizing that the Charger was no true rival for Mustang or Camaro, Dodge bosses kept demanding their own pony car. Eventually, Chrysler gave in, and the new model was built on the E-Body platform, developed primarily for the third-generation Barracuda. The E-Body was designed larger and heavier than before to properly house massive V8s like the 426 Hemi or 440 Magnum. The new Barracuda thus grew in size, and the Challenger was made even bigger, a 279-centimeter wheelbase versus the Barracuda's 274, and an overall length of 4.86 meters. 12 centimeters longer. The Challenger was also about 4 centimeters wider. Visually, Challenger and Barracuda were quite similar, especially in profile, but their panels were not interchangeable and each model had its own trim and detailing. The Challenger was styled by Carl Cameron, creator of the first Charger, while John Hurlitz handled the Barracuda. Both looked similar to each other and, crucially, to Camaro and Firebird with their long hoods, short trunks, and muscular proportions, the winning formula for late 60s pony cars. But while GM released the new Camaro and Firebird in 1967-1968 with more aggressive designs, Dodge's Challenger only arrived for 1970, at the very moment GM unveiled even sleeker, more European-looking second-generation models. As a result, the Challenger and Barracuda were stylistically outdated almost immediately. Starting the project back in 1966, Dodge designers had failed to predict the next decade's styling trends, another serious misstep. Comparing the first Challenger and third Barracuda to late 60s Camaros and Firebirds, the GM cars clearly looked bolder and more aggressive, and few would deny it. To back up its muscular looks, Dodge offered the broadest possible engine lineup. The base model came with a 3.7-liter straight-six producing 145 horsepower and 292 newton-meters, good for a 0 to 60 miles per hour time of 13 seconds. Above it sat 8 different V8s, from a 5.2-liter 318 with 230 horsepower to the legendary 426 Hemi rated at 425 horsepower. Buyers could choose between a 3- or 4-speed manual or a TorqueFlite automatic. In total, up to 20 powertrain combinations were available. Challenger's performance ranged from adequate to impressive, but its real strength was the endless options list. Multiple steering wheels, fabric, vinyl, or leather interiors, several air conditioning systems, up to 5 different hood scoops, 18 paint colors, including wild, high-impact shades, decals, spoilers, radios, and hubcap designs. The chances of finding 2 identical Challengers were minimal. Sales began in late summer 1969. On paper, the Challenger had everything: aggressive styling, strong engines, and rich customization. Chrysler expected 200,000 sales a year. But reality proved harsher. Though powerful, the huge engine struggled against the heavy E-body platform. The Hemi produced 425 horsepower and 664 Newton-meters, but pushed a car weighing over 1.7 tons, covering the quarter mile in 14 seconds, only 48th among muscle cars. It was also expensive and came with a limited warranty. A more practical option was the 440 six-pack with triple Holley carburetors, delivering 390 horsepower and the same torque, running the quarter in 13.6 seconds and costing nearly half as much as the Hemi. Other engines, like the 383 Magnum, 335 horsepower, and the 340, 275-290 horsepower, offered a better balance of performance and drivability. Yet, suspension remained typical muscle car fare. Torsion bars up front, leaf springs out back. Even performance packages couldn't eliminate body roll and poor handling. In 1969, Sports Car Graphic measured lateral grip of just 0.68 grams for the Challenger 440, similar to a civilian Hummer from the 90s. Add weak brakes, abysmal fuel consumption up to 8 miles per gallon, a cramped cabin, and mediocre build quality, and the flaws piled up. Pricing was another problem. A base Challenger cost $2,851, more than a Mustang or Camaro, and with options could exceed $6,000. Insurance added up to another 25% of the car's price. The youth market, the main target for muscle cars, simply couldn't afford it. First-year sales reached only 80,000 units, with the Barracuda faring even worse. Loyal Dodge customers helped somewhat, but smaller models like the Duster and Dart sold far better. The Challenger wasn't a bad car per se, but too many factors worked against it. In 5 years of production through 1974, fewer than 200,000 were sold. By comparison, Mustang sales approached 1 million, and Camaro topped 600,000. The Challenger was simply late to the party. Soon after, the oil crisis and the collapse of the muscle car market sealed its fate. In 1978, Dodge tried to revive the nameplate on a rebadged Mitsubishi Galant Lambda, but it never gained traction. Only in the mid-2000s did Dodge successfully capitalize on nostalgia, unveiling the third-generation Challenger concept at the 2006 Detroit Auto Show, almost a direct throwback to the original. To the surprise of skeptics, it went into production in 2007 nearly unchanged. First-year sales were just 19,000 units, but by 2018, U.S. sales climbed to nearly 67,000. Today, the Challenger is not the leader of its segment, but it is the only model to retain clear visual continuity with the classic original. Perhaps that's why its sales remain steady, while Mustang and Camaro fluctuate. Meanwhile, the first-generation Challenger has become one of the most respected and valuable classic muscle cars, with auction prices long since exceeding $100,000 to $200,000. In spring 2019, a rare Challenger Hemi convertible with the Super Track Pack sold for $1,430,000.